Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life is Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I'm your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Camus. He personally offers and leads public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout the state of Massachusetts. Currently, the communities he has chosen to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. His tours spotlight the canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks, streets, and selected historical houses within each community. In today's episode, we will be discussing the B'nai Jacob Synagogue and Cemetery located in Springfield, West Springfield, and Longmeadow. So tell us about the history of the B'nai Jacob Synagogue in Springfield and Longmeadow.
Okay, the B'nai Jacob Synagogue started out in Springfield, of course, and B'nai means sons of, so a lot of people just call this the Sons of Jacob Synagogue. Now, it started out being the absolute first of all the Jewish congregations in Springfield, and that's 7 congregations. This is the first. Started in 1891 in the north end of Springfield, and there they had a little temple going for themselves. All right, but it was just basically a storefront, and then finally in 1921, 30 years later, they built their first dedicated temple or synagogue, and that was on Congress Street in Springfield. All right, but even there, they kept growing and growing, and they would, 1963, move out to Longmeadow. And there on 2 Eunice Drive, they would build up their temple. And that temple is still there, but it's actually not B'nai Jacob anymore. So we're going to talk about during this what has happened to it. We're also going to talk about B'nai Jacob Cemetery in West Springfield and some of its history and features there. So this was the first one, and it doesn't officially exist anymore, but it blended in. So in some sense, it's still around. And it's always been a part of Springfield since the 1890s. And even its 1921 building, I believe, is still there. I'll have to check that. But I know its temple in Longmeadow is there.
And what has happened to their temple in recent years?
Okay, so they themselves, B'nai Jacob, has merged into the Temple Beth El, that's in Springfield, but near the Longmeadow border. The B'nai Jacob was in a great position, very close to the Springfield Jewish Cultural Center. But when they merged in 2007 with Bethel, they still stayed in that general area, so they could still very easily use the services of the community center. And now they're blended into a very strong congregation. So, in some sense, B'nai Jacob is still with us, the oldest of all the Jewish congregations. Now, what has happened to the place that they were in, their actual temple location? Well, it's now called Congregation B'nai Torah, and as of 2007, there was a merger. And there was a merger of Beth Israel, Kesser Israel, and Kodomo, and they formed that new congregation inside of the B'nai Jacob Synagogue. And so that congregation, B'nai Jacob, moved with three other congregations, joined their forces and moved into the old temple of B'nai Jacob.
And really quick, before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, for more information or to sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there you can find videos and podcasts of the stops along each of his tours, as well as photos and text of the historical sites throughout as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, @yahoo.com. And his tours make for fun, educational, outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, tell us about the Benai Jacob Cemetery in West Springfield.
All right, in West Springfield you have 4 cemeteries of the Jewish religion, all in a row, all adjacent to one another. Benai Jacob was the first one out there, and they built up a nice cemetery from the south. They never built an outdoor chapel, but Beth El Cemetery did, and they were able to use that. All right, and they were always associated with the congregation of Benai Jacob in Springfield. So all the people buried in this cemetery are from that one congregation. And the Jewish people place great importance on having a cemetery for every congregation or temple that exists. Now, in this cemetery, there are some features to look into, and it is one of probably the second largest of the 4, and it sweeps towards the back a little bit. There are a few nice old stones towards the front that have nice descriptions. And remember, in the Jewish gravestone, you're going to have typically at least 4 lines, with the first line being a salutation that's usually repeated in English above. The second line is usually the name of the person. The third line, the birth and death dates. And then the fourth line, a quote that says you're going to bound yourself to the future. Now, inside the cemetery, you have many, many old burials, and then some from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and then the modern ones are out towards the far back.
And what are some of the features of this cemetery?
Okay. One feature I noticed is that there's not many old burials like you would expect if they were the first one out there, and that being in 1891. There's not particularly that many old burials. Does that say a lot about the demographics of the people that started this cemetery? Or is it saying that the cemetery that they abut onto, which is the cemetery of Beth Israel, did they share this old portion together and then finally break it off into 2 different cemeteries? That might be looked into also. So at some point I want to do some research and figure out on these old burials what congregations these people belong to. So sure, look at the death records and then check out the obituaries and see what's going up in this old section of these 2 cemeteries.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And of course, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And check out a large selection of our other podcasts at his website, and as well as on SoundCloud.com. And be sure to stay up to date with new podcasts and videos posted daily. Thank you, and hope you join us again.